2/3 of the applicants do why law or why GW law, and it's usually it's a solid statement, but it's hard to stand out sometimes. So
what would you like to see?
The ones I like to see are very personal, specific, and they're tight, and as I said, they show it reflected insight and depth that you don't see in a normal one. And more than anything, I see potential. Like, I understand, I can feel their passion. I know what they're going to do with the law degree, even if they don't always say it.
Welcome to Admission Straight Talk, the podcast dedicated to graduate admissions and helping you approach the application process thoughtfully and successfully. Your host is Accepted's founder and world-renowned admissions guru, Linda Abraham. At Accepted, our mission is to get you to that unforgettable moment when you read your acceptance email and shout, "Yes, I'm in!" Confident you'll be attending the perfect program to help you launch the career of your dreams.
Thanks for joining me for the 584th episode of Admission Straight Talk. Are you applying to law school this cycle? Are you planning ahead to apply to law school next year or later? Are you competitive at your target programs? Well, Accepted's Law School Admissions Quiz can give you a quick reality check. Just complete the quiz and you'll not only get an assessment, but tips on how to improve your chances of acceptance. Plus, it's all free. Again, take the short quiz, accepted.com/law-quiz to obtain your free assessment. Now for today's interview. I'm delighted to have on Admission Straight Talk for the first time, Dean Sophia Sim of George Washington School of Law. Dean Sim earned her bachelor's degree from Columbia and her JD from Georgetown. However, she has worked professionally for all or most of her career in higher ed, starting at the University of Maryland. She then worked as director of admissions at Georgetown Law before becoming associate dean for admissions and financial aid at George Washington University School of Law in 2011. She has also served in many different capacities for the American Association of Law Schools, AALS, and the Law School Admissions Council, LSAC, and currently is a chair-elect on the AALS section on pre-law education and admission to law school. Now, I'm not going to go into all the committees that she's been on or led because it frankly would just take too long, but just rest assured it's very impressive. Dean Sim, thanks for joining me on Admission Straight Talk.
Oh, thank you. Call me Sophia. If you don't mind me calling you Linda.
That's fine. That's fine with me. Absolutely. I'm delighted to speak with you today. To start, could you give me an overview, or I guess an overview, of the more distinctive elements of the George Washington JD program?
Sure. So we're founded in 1865. We're the oldest law school in the city and one of the oldest ones in the country. We, our dean, who started in 2020, Dean Dana Bowen Matthew, really did an overhaul where she talked about our vision and our mission, and we have a strategic plan that we currently go through. But I kind of encapsulated in the way she refers to it. She's always looking for the 3 I's. It's a global law school where we want to educate students so they can innovate, influence, and inspire others. And that's what we look for. In terms of what makes us distinctive, our first year curriculum is a little bit different. We won an ABA award for changing the way law school is being taught. There's the Inns of Court system, which is kind of the foundation for everything that happens within the first year from your advising and on. Having some unique classes within that first year, such as fundamentals of lawyering instead of the traditional legal research and writing. This goes more into client relationships, into appellate writing, things like that, and professional identity formation, which is also a linchpin, just because there's been so many studies about lawyers not being happy when they've been in for 10, 20 years. And then because we're in DC, we've had a long history of experiential education, so kind of balancing that with the doctrinal learning.
It's interesting. Almost always when I ask this question of other admissions deans about, what's the distinctive of your features of your law school program, they skip the first year.
Oh, okay.
They don't even, it's like, oh, that's just, that's just standard.
Oh, that's interesting. So,
yeah, it is interesting. Very interesting. And I love the innovate, influence, and inspire motto. That's a great one.
That's Dean Matthews. That's her. So I can't take credit for it, but I do like it. So, yeah.
So one of the things I noticed in preparing for the call, and you touched on it a little bit in your response to my last question, was that GW Law provides a broad menu of course offerings and experiential opportunities, which you mentioned, and clinics. At the same time, the website emphasizes the importance of planning a balanced program once the required curriculum is completed. What, in your view, is a balanced program if a student has a specific area of interest they want to go into? Let's say they want to go into public interest law, or they want to go into mergers and acquisitions, just to take the opposite ends of the spectrum. What makes a balanced program if you know the direction, if you have direction?
Yes. And I think, within the strategic plan, there came to be 7 educational objectives that the law school was focused on. And so things such as knowing substantive and procedural law, being able to understand and analyze the law to make you a good lawyer, right? And so that's kind of the foundation for why we want a balanced program. And yes, balanced in terms of doing that experiential and doctrinal learning that I mentioned, which is difficult. We've got the second largest array of courses in the country and 500 field placements, but also making sure that when you come out of GW, you've hit those learning objectives and you're a good all-around attorney. And so, as I mentioned, that fundamentals of lawyering, that also has, in addition to that legal research and writing, the contract drafting and things like that. But for me personally, I also see a balanced program as kind of taking things outside your area of interest, right? It's so easy to get tunnel vision and just go, I'm going to take classes all within X field and not think about all the other things that not only make you a well-rounded lawyer, but maybe you'll shift in your career later. And so that's kind of the way our advising works. You can do concentrations in certain areas, but we also recommend that you take these other classes. And of course, you can do those experiential learning requirements through the 19 clinics or those 500 field placements I mentioned. So, yeah.
And actually, my next question is to dive a little bit deeper into the experiential opportunities. Obviously, GW is located in Washington, D.C. I'm sure that affects
it totally does. Yes.
So how?
So,
give me a few examples if you could.
So one of the things, the mantra we all have here at GW is that we're not just a school located in DC, we're a DC infused school, right? So we try to take advantage of every facet of that. And that's partially why that field placements or externships, if you want to call them more generally, started decades ago before the ABA had a requirement. So
really,
there's 500 in the White House, every federal agency, a whole host of different things. And there's also unique opportunities we try to pull from being in DC. I mean, we're 4 blocks from the White House. So we once had a international human rights viewing inside the White House. This past year, Justice Breyer did a 6-part conversation series with us, where he talked about his life as a college student, then as a law student, where the students were. We've had Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is going to judge our upper class moot next year. I'm trying to think. Oh, the Military Court of Appeals does a live session here every year for our national security program. So, those things that whatever you end up doing with your law degree, you'll remember your experience here because it's something that's very unique.
Okay. Sounds like there's a lot of different opportunities there. Let's turn to the application.
Okay.
Now, I saw on the website that applicants can apply with the GRE, the GMAT, or JD Next. But if they have the LSAT will be used. Now, I assume that's because of ABA requirements. But does GW have a preference for the test, for a specific test?
So the LSAT has always been the gold standard back in my day when I was a law student. And it's kind of hard to shift that, especially with the ABA if you've taken the LSAT, you're obligated to report the LSAT score. So we still kind of follow that, even though we're holistic. But we actually just 2 weeks ago got approval for an ABA variance, which is an exception under the rules. So we actually are allowed to waive the standardized test requirement, any standardized test.
Really?
For a series of different things. We significant work experience, things like patent bar, Peace Corps, full-time work, serving in the military, starting your doctoral program someplace. So we're kind of ironing out the details now, but we will be posting that up shortly. So you don't have to take a test. Sometimes it's hard when you're later in life to find the time to study and prepare for it. So yes, we will be able to do waivers. But in terms of the other tests, the reason we accept them all is we offer it as a convenience to our students and service. You should take the test that you think you're going to perform the strongest on. However, if you take the LSAT, as I said, under ABA rules, that's the one we're obligated to report. So that's the one we will review. So, yeah.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. So applicants will be able to apply for a waiver if they fit certain categories and apply without any tests, correct?
Correct. I know it's a
Okay.
game changer, isn't it? It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
that exists in the MBA world and certainly in
it
many
does.
other
Okay.
graduate specialties, but I
Okay.
haven't heard of it yet in law school.
Because we've had so many people being located where we are, right?
Right.
There's so many who have a significant work experience, or, you know, if it's a campaign year, they're focused on elections. They don't have time to prepare. People that are in the military that come here,
Yeah.
a variety of reasons. And so we were like, is an LSAT an accurate predictor of their success? And so we did some studies on it, and we don't think that's necessarily true in those cases. So
Got it.
So this is a 5-year variance. So we're going to study it further for 5 years, and then
I assume
see
you
if
collect
something-
data on the
Yep.
success of those students and all that
Yes.
stuff.
We
Okay.
collected some originally, but this will be a much more in-depth study. So yes.
That makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, there's obviously a strong emphasis on experiential learning at George Washington, and it predated the requirement for that kind of learning.
Mhm.
What kind of experience do you want to see in applicants?
That's a good question. And I don't know, we try to be very holistic in our review process. So there's not a set type of experience that we're looking for. Sometimes you have to work as a server because you're trying to make ends meet, right?
course.
You're not always able to do the professional or law firm kind of work or volunteerism. It's just people are coming from all different situations. So, I mean, I would say anything that in terms of studies teaches you analytical thinking, reading, or writing is a great approach. And through work too, that could happen. But what we don't want to see is that you're not doing anything, right? The old days, I don't even know if there were old days back then, but where you hear people playing volleyball on the beach. That's not what we're looking for. We want students that
Have a good spike.
yeah. So we want people that are really out there, and they're maximizing their experience, whatever it may be. So yeah.
Do you prefer students who have some full-time, I don't mean summer vacation, I mean like post-college, a year or two of full-time work experience, or does it?
We do like that because it does make you're more mature. You have a much more mature outlook on life, some sophistication. You have something more to write about that's unusual. But I also tell students, don't take a gap year just because you think that'll get, do what feels right for you. Everybody it's an individual thing. If you're ready to go to law school, don't wait. And you can always apply. It doesn't work, then you work for a couple of years or something. So
Right. True. I also, I use it all the time. I use the expression gap year all the time, but another interviewee said it was a med school admissions director. It shouldn't be a gap year. It should be a growth year.
that's a good way of looking at it. Yes. Because
And it stuck with me because it is a good way of
yes,
looking at it.
yes,
Gap just
yes.
means you got a gap. I mean, you're supposed to be
Yes.
doing something in there.
You should be doing something. And if for law school admissions, you should be doing something 2 years because you're usually applying a year in advance. So if
Sure.
you only take a gap year, it's not going to help you at all but I also tell students your career starts when you enter law school, right? So your summers are not your own. So if there's anything you wanted to do, that growth year is the time to do it. If there are things you want to explore, you don't want to come to law school burned out or not sure you want to become a lawyer, and then halfway through law school decide it's not a right fit for me. You want to decide all that beforehand.
Should the personal statement address either why law and or why GW?
So that's kind of a hot button issue for me because I know a lot of my colleagues at other law schools, been doing this for over 30 years, love when you talk about the school. I
Okay.
don't.
Okay.
Now, the two schools I worked at get the most and the second most number of applications in the country. So I've read a lot of personal statements.
Sure you have.
and the thing is, the reason I say that is if it's why law, it's always, I wanted to be a lawyer my whole life. Here's what I've done. And it's almost like your resume in paragraph form, or I've never wanted to be a lawyer until X happened to me. And then here's what I've done. Why GW law, usually if you're writing it correctly, it's about you're spitting your website back at us, right? These are the things. It doesn't give me any insight into you, and it's a personal statement. I don't want to learn about GW law. I want to learn about you. Now, there are always exceptions to this. There are some phenomenal ones that are written where people have very unique backgrounds, or they have a certain specific passion for an area of law, or they worked with a professor or read their writing. And so there are always exceptions, but 2/3 of the applicants do why law or why GW law. And it's usually, it's a solid statement, but it's hard to stand out sometimes. So
What would you like to see?
the ones I like to see are very personal, specific, and they're tight, and as I said, they show it reflected insight and depth that you don't see in a normal one. And more than anything, I see potential. Like, I understand, I can feel their passion. I know what they're going to do with the law degree, even if they don't always say it. Years ago, I read a beautiful one where an older gentleman talked about the sunset of his life, right? And how everybody looks at sunset and what he had left to accomplish. And it was so well written. I still have it someplace in my messy desk, but sometimes it's really reflective, and it explains to me who you are and why you are who you are and what you want to do with it, right? And those are the really good ones, personal ones.
It might reflect a non-professional interest that somehow, I'm thinking of one that stands out in my mind from, again, this is from the 1990s. And it was actually about a non-professional interest that the fellow had. And it only in the last sentence did he tie it into law. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
And he later told me that it was being passed around the offices of various law schools because it was so good.
Good.
It almost needed nothing from me. It was great. It was wonderful, but it had very little superficially to do with the law.
Yes. And those are really the good ones. And it's hard to
It had a lot to do with him.
Yes. And students sometimes start, they sit down at the beginning of a weekend and they're like, I'm going to pound out this personal statement, right? I'm going to write it all. And it can't be done that way. Yes. You really need to think and understand who you are. So, and be authentic. Yep.
I think they also have to think about what they want you to know about them. What are they proud of? What do they want you to know?
Yeah. I agree.
So anyways, who should write the optional identity statement that's on your...
We wrote this very vaguely and generally because we wanted people to understand how they identify. It could be an area of law, it could be anything. And students ask me that, and I say, well, if you don't know, then you're probably not the person that should write one, right? And so you have to, it could be for whatever you identify with, but we kind of chose that word deliberately to keep it very open-ended for anybody, to give them the opportunity. So,
okay. So it's open-ended. They can do with it what they want, in terms of their identity. Obviously, they have to address the question. Are you open to addenda that might address an academic weakness or an academic infraction or potential character and fitness issues? Those are...
Absolutely. And to be fair, I think all law schools are or should be open to accepting that. So
yeah. I might have missed it on your website. That's all.
We actually don't put it, but maybe we should. I'm going to make a note here.
Okay.
Click my pen. I just assume people knew they could, but maybe it's better just to state that we can. The one thing I will say, if you do an agenda, it's not another personal statement, right? It's not, it's like a half-page explanation. These are all electronic, double-spaced, 12-point font for everything, easy on my reading glass eyes these days. But if you're talking about poor grades or something like, you should try to think of this as a strategy. It should end on a positive note. Otherwise, you're just highlighting a weakness, and not always a good thing. So
great advice. I would add that ideally, if it's more of a character issue, then if you can tell me what you think of this, I would say that if they could provide an incident where they a similar incident where they behaved in the correct way, they basically show repentance, if you will.
Yes.
And the best way to show that is say, I was in the same situation. I didn't do it again.
Yeah, that's excellent. I don't think I've ever come across an explanation like that. So that would be good. So,
right. All right. Could you briefly review the binding early decision program?
Sure. So we have two binding programs at GW. We have the binding presidential and the binding early decision. So both have slightly earlier deadlines in their application, February 1st. And we review them rolling admissions, just like we do for the regular. Early decision is the classic early decision that you did as an undergrad. So it's binding. it gives you a slight bump because it's your way of saying this is my absolute top choice. We tell you not to select this option if finances are a factor. We do review you for scholarships. About half of the students did receive a merit scholarship, but we still say you can't count on that, right? So only apply early decision if you're sure that you can attend and that it's your top choice. Presidential is the full ride. It's the only full tuition scholarships we give at GW, designed to be for the most competitive applicants nationally. So you have to be extremely strong to apply for a presidential. So
speaking of being extremely strong, your median LSAT is 168 and the median GPA is 3.85. So the stats are way up there. And obviously an important part of the admissions process. They show that somebody has the intellectual capability to handle the curriculum. But my guess is that you also admit people with lower stats, that's the nature of a medium, and reject people with higher stats, since you had 8,310 applications for the 2023 entering class of 496 people. Full-time 1Ls, I'm talking. What makes a difference between a competitive application and a captivating, engaging, persuasive application?
That's a great question. And I wish I had an answer for you. It's kind of like the secret sauce, right? What is the secret?
I guess
what
I could say, but yeah.
Yeah, what takes it from a solid application to an outstanding one?
Yeah, a compelling one.
Compelling one, engaging one. I mean, captivating, all wonderful terms, right? I would love to read applications like that. And obviously the personal statement, there's only so much you can control by the time you're applying. Right. Your grades are pretty much set. Hopefully you've picked the best recommenders to write your letters of recommendation. If you've been in a student group, hopefully you've got some leadership or volunteer experience, things like that. So most people focus on the personal statement because that's the only thing they can change at this stage. But I would say also, when you're thinking about filling out an application, think of it as a strategy and don't just blindly fill it out. That's one thing you can control at this point. And think about how it reflects upon you. So, I just read one where someone said they wanted to do international law. Again, they did the almost YGW law one where they talked about our international curriculum. But then they talked about study abroad. Their letter of recommendation was from someone study abroad. And their essay was about international law and how it was triggered because they did a study abroad. So they might have thought that was great, but I think it just was very one note to me. It didn't show other facets of themselves. It also didn't show a depth of why they really wanted to do international law. Just because you've studied and had a great experience in another country isn't enough. It might spark it, but there needs to be more than that. So
what are your goals in international law?
Yes.
What would you like to contribute?
Yes. And so I think this person thought it was a captivating, engaging, persuasive argument because she felt like she persuaded, it was interesting, etc. But it wasn't that nth level, that secret sauce, as I'm mentioning. Yeah. So I think that it really is a little bit of the $1 million question, right? And I think part of it is going back to that authentic. You can only be true to yourself and reflect yourself in the best light possible, and figure out if the school is a great fit for you. It's hard to, you can strategize, but it's hard to kind of massage this in a way that where you don't even recognize who you are on paper by the time you write this sometimes.
Right.
And my kids both just applied to college. So I get you go down this rabbit hole and you're just like, what does the school want? How do I get admitted? And what do I, but yes, we really are at the end of the day still looking at that potential. Like what sets you apart from somebody else or the other applicants that I'm reading, right? So.
Right. Yeah, it's there's a lot on the applicants. They do want to get in,
right?
But I think the point you made about strategy is a great one, and it is it is obviously the things you can't control. But you know what you put in the activity sections and how you portray the activities and the activities you choose to highlight, that is still in your control, and that is also reflective of the applicant. Everybody focuses on the personal statement. Well, that's good for my business. It's not, it's not the entire application.
It's not. And how you describe those things, you're right.
Yeah.
And it's funny when I look at activities, people always a lot of times they just list it and they don't say how much time they did. I don't know if you volunteered at a soup kitchen every week for 4 years or just one weekend to put on to add a line item to your resume. So yes, how you describe things does make a difference. So,
and if you focus on accomplishments as opposed to responsibilities in a resume or in activity descriptions, that all makes a difference.
Yeah. And it's hard too, because you don't want to overly brag, but you don't want to be too humble and modest at this stage either.
False modesty is not,
yes,
no, it doesn't work. For sure. Now you mentioned the variants that GW has received. Any other anticipated changes for the 2024-2025 application cycle? No. Okay, that's a big one. That's a big one.
And we are really flexible. I know some of my colleagues at other schools are very particular about a certain number of pages and a gold paper clip, even though things are electronic now. Stop using that. But if you need to attach addendum, if there's things you need to add, if you're emailing us, feel free to do that. So,
all right. You mentioned emailing you. That kind of leads to my next question. Does GW consider update letters from applicants who have something significant to tell you after they submit their application and before hearing back from you? And what if somebody's waitlisted?
Yes, we absolutely do welcome, especially if you've got significant updates, even things like a job promotion. Certainly, if you've got something that's happened to you since then, you should share that with us. It's part of who you are. So, and if you're on the wait list, we do invite you actually and encourage you to submit letters of continued interest. So,
okay, no interview at GW, right?
Oh, geez. You asked me if anything was going to be anticipated changes for next year, and I said nothing beyond that. We will be starting an interview process.
Ooh, that's also big.
Yes. Thank you. It's just, I would say it's late afternoon but it's not true. I just completely slipped my mind. So we actually just talked about it last week, and we're going to iron it out. It likely will be for those that apply early in our cycle by September or October, because we want to go small at this stage and test it out. It's going to be just by the admissions directors and myself. So we're not going to expand it to the alumni.
All 8,000.
Yes.
All 8,000 applicants.
Or 8,000 applicants. And we're going to wrap it up before mid-December. So just so we don't keep people waiting and get them a decision quickly. So it's going to be that cohort that we're planning to interview. Right now, I know there's a lot of virtual interviews on there, and I see the benefits of it. And it's not to say we won't do that, but we also are looking at the med school model as well in terms of how they do an all-day kind of interview process. And so we might end up doing that, but we'll post the information as soon as we make that decision. So
right. Actually, most med school, it's interesting. One business school I was just looking at yesterday, I forget which one it was, gives the applicant the option of an in-person or virtual interview. And most med schools at this point are virtual. Almost all. And even if they do the day thing, it's virtual.
Yes. Because you can't always afford to come to the school, right, for an interview. And we get that too. So, but then we thought if people are here and they want to do the in-person, we should also offer that for them. So we are thinking about a hybrid, but then having done both a lot of times we go to the college campuses or offer them a pre-law advisor at a certain college will ask us to do virtual ones, and I feel like it's a little different in person than it is virtual, right? And how do you assess them both equally? So, but you're right. I mean, I think virtual cannot be out of the equation. We have to offer that, but yeah, we'd like to do both if we can.
So. You'll work it out, I'm sure.
We'll work it out. So
yeah. What do you think of applicants using ChatGPT to assist them, not write it, to assist them in the writing process?
We actually have a statement on our application that says you have not used ChatGPT or AI except for Grammarly in your personal statement, whether even for ideas. So,
all right. Okay. Now, at this point, do you still have people on the wait list for the 2024 entering class?
We do. We have students that sometimes will come orientation and are waiting. So, yeah.
What advice do you have for them?
Patience. It's so difficult to wait, and we get that. And we try to keep the lines of communication open. We have waitlist Zoom sessions. We are exchanging emails with people. They call, they visit, and we understand and we welcome you. And if you have deadlines, or you have firm scholarship requirements because another school offered you something and you can't attend, and we can have a very frank conversation with you about those possibilities. So this is very different than, and this could be my kids, but with the college admission process, it was struck me how different it was, right? It's really hard to reach someone. Even their websites don't always have phone numbers or things like that. And even if you do, you're talking to a call center operator. It's a little different at law schools, at all law schools, not just GW, but we're fine with you contacting us. So.
Okay, great. What if somebody has a situation where they're waitlisted at GW, GW is their first choice, and they get a notice that they've been admitted at another program? Do you want to be notified? Do you want them just to make their decision as best they can?
It's up to them if they want to. If they made that decision, they can. But usually we get calls that say, I've gotten into this school and I have 3 days to make the decision. What can you, and we kind of we talk to them. And so sometimes it works out. Sometimes we're really full, right? It's just depends on where we are. But we definitely would love to hear from you, because one of the things we do for waitlists, if you really want to come, we really want to take you. We want people that have been waiting patiently for months on this wait list to be excited when they get an offer, versus someone else that's like, I've already kind of moved on or something like that. So it's such a great feeling. And some of our strongest graduates and alumni are those that are on the wait list. I've been here since 2011, and I think at least 5 of our Student Bar Association presidents were waitlists. 2 were the last people we admitted at the very end. Yeah. So.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. What advice do you have for those people who, whether they were waitlisted or not, who ultimately are rejected, and they really want to go to GW? They want to reapply.
Okay. So reapply. I tell students, sometimes things change from cycle to cycle. Don't be surprised if you don't change anything and you get the exact same decision, right? But the rolling admissions process is a real thing for us. People that were admitted in October may not be admitted in March. And so maybe you need to apply earlier, or maybe there were a lot of LSAT hiccups this year in terms of the testing administration. So people were delayed in getting the score results. So, or maybe with the elimination of logic games, people will score better, or for a variety of reasons. They had other reasons they were delayed. So applying early may make a difference. We actually do not go back and look at the old application. I kind of feel like you're a fresh applicant. And so we are judging you based upon what you submit. And that's what we look at. Now, what I do recall, there was one student that I just happened to remember their character and fitness statement. And I remember their name, and they reapplied and they checked, no, they had nothing. And then I remembered their last one did have it, and I went back and pulled it. And so you definitely don't want to do something like that. But so I should say generally, we don't go back. If there are things you want us to pull from your old application, we can do that for you too. So.
All right. What advice would you give somebody who's not planning to apply this cycle, but is planning ahead to apply in 2025 or even 2026? As I'm saying these years, I'm thinking, my gosh. But anyways, the point is that they're not applying this cycle. They're planning ahead to apply somewhere in the future beyond this cycle.
Okay. It's funny, the more, as I said, I've been doing this a long time, but now I see freshmen come, or first years, I guess you don't say freshmen anymore. I come to the law fairs when we visit college campuses and things. People are starting earlier and earlier and earlier. And
what do you get high school students?
Yeah. We actually are hosting a high school group next week. They've asked if they can come. So it is a little, and we get parents now, which also is kind of seems like a newer trend. So I guess I would say it really depends. For the freshmen, I'm like, just enjoy getting into college. Just enjoy that first year and learn about school. Don't already start thinking about law school. But if you're thinking about taking a gap year and things like that, or a growth year, it's probably, it never hurts to check in with us. Some of the advice I give people is, for all law schools, you have to sign up for the Law School Admission Council's Credential Assembly Service, the CAS report, where you send your recommendations, your transcripts, things like that. When you sign up, it's good for 5 years. So if you know you're going to apply in 5 years, I always tell people, before you leave your college camp, maybe it's good to get your recommendation in there, right? Sure. And then later you can ask them to update it, or different things like that. So sometimes we can give you advice and sometimes we can't, but The other thing I'd say is everybody tries to fit everything in during that 1 year they're applying. So sometimes they don't have a chance to visit the school or in the way that they want it. If you have time and you're kind of traveling, pop by the schools that you're interested in and visit.
Or if you are taking the LSAT, sometimes they take the LSAT not at the optimal time, let's say later, maybe the beginning of the cycle, they don't get the score they want, then they want to retake the LSAT, which means they
That's an excellent
end up
point.
apply later. So take the LSAT, prepare for, take the LSAT or whatever test you're going to take it early, so that if you have to retake it, it's not going to mean that you're applying later in the cycle.
I mean, I had a student that Peace Corps, right? And she decided to wait to take the LSAT to give her time to prepare. But then like the testing site, she couldn't get to it. There was some issue and she wasn't able, or the internet connection wasn't great. I can't remember the details, but it didn't turn out the way she wanted. So it never hurts to kind of take the test early while you're still kind of in that school mode. So
right. And I think the LSAT's good for 5 years, isn't it?
It is good for 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's correct.
Right.
True for the GRE too. Yeah.
Right. What would you have liked me to ask you?
Thank you for warning me before we started the session that you're going to ask me that. And I was like, what can I say? And so there really wasn't, it was a very thorough interview, but what I will say is I didn't get really a chance to talk about the community. And it's one of the reasons I absolutely love working here at GW. I mean, the students are phenomenal. Our SBA has several times won being the best student government out of all law schools.
Wow.
And they have an outline bank that everybody stores their outlines. 100% of the students do that. And I feel like they really kind of set that tone that you stand on the shoulders of each other. And it's not this one huge competition, guys. Everybody's going for different career paths, different things, whether it's public interest or private. And, together we're stronger. And I see that at the alumni stage. I see it in the so many people that volunteer to be student ambassadors and things like that. It just really is such a wonderful community. And some people tell me it's better than their undergraduate years. So it's something that I think is very unique at law schools.
I think that is distinctive. I mean, law schools are known for a very competitive, sometimes even cutthroat environment. So that is unique or distinctive. And I want to thank you for raising it. So you did think of a good thing to address in that question.
Okay.
So
no, that's why I love working here. So
yeah, that's great. I think we're almost out of time. I want to thank you very, very much for joining me and sharing your expertise and insight into George Washington specifically. But I think there's a lot here for all law school applicants. Obviously, your experience is enormous in the field. Where can listeners learn more about George Washington University Law School?
Well, obviously our website, we tried a podcast and it didn't work. So tips from you, but we will be doing some virtual Zoom sessions starting in late July. And we have our travel schedule and people can make appointments and pop in. I mean, my door is right next to the front door. So I'm always popping out to say hello. So, and I know a lot of our program deans that specialize in different areas also travel quite a bit. Yes, so it's not hard to find us if you want to. So,
all right, great. Well, thank you again. Listeners, we're going to include links in the show notes at accepted.com/584 to the George Washington University Law School website, as well as to other resources that may be helpful to you. Thank you, listeners, also for joining me for this wonderful interview with Dean Sim. If you found this show worthwhile, please make sure you don't miss any others. Subscribe through your favorite podcatcher. We have subscribe links in the show notes at accepted.com/584. Quick reminder, don't miss the law school admissions quiz. Find out if you're really ready to apply and competitive at your target schools. Take the quiz at accepted.com/law-quiz today. This is Admission Straight Talk, produced by Accepted, and I am your host, Linda Abraham. I'll talk to you again next week.